Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of All Things Logistics. My name is Jill Williams, and I am here to talk about the difference between freight forwarders, freight brokers, dispatchers, and owner operators finding loads on their own. Now, I'm not going to go through all of them specifically in detail today, but I am going to give an overview. What's the difference between them? And then at the end, I'm going to do an analysis of a freight dispatcher first. And then over the next couple of days, I'm going to be bringing back more information in regards to the other broker and forwarder models to see which one works for truck drivers, which one should you be looking for. So let's get into this. Let's talk about what's the difference between each. So I'm going to use Google as my presenter to do all these. So let's get started. So first off, we're looking at a freight forwarder. What is a freight forwarder? Well, according to Google, a freight forwarder is a firm specializing in the in the arrangement of cargo on behalf of shippers. In most cases, freight forwarders provide a variety of supply chain services, including ocean or air freight transportation, inland transportation from origin or to the destination. What that means, inland transportation, it'll either move by rail or to move by truck or both. It depends. So when we look at a graph here, this is what we see with a freight forwarder. We see that a freight forwarder, most of the time they're dealing with international shipments. So here we have the concierge overseas, somewhere like China or Europe, and they package or they have manufactured something. They load it up in a truck, they move it to the port. The freight forwarder is helping with all of that. Now, when I used to work in freight forwarding, one of the key things that was important to me is I had to get in touch with the freight forwarder overseas, our office, so that we could make sure that we were on track as to when the shipment was coming over to the United States. So once the shipment is loaded, information is then transported along with the shipment to the other freight forwarding office, usually here in the United States. Once it arrives at the port, it must go through customs. Customs usually inspects the shipment to see whether or not it's going to be allowed in. Now, freight forwarder has some options. They can either send that shipment by air to a destination, they can send it by truck or by rail, and it will depend on the relationship with the shipper and what they require. Then they will arrange for that to be picked up by here. Once it clears through everything and they decide on their load, it'll be picked up for the final destination by a truck, and it'll arrive at the concierge. So that's freight brokerage. Now, freight brokers and freight forwarders are essentially the same. Here we're looking at a definition where a freight broker is a business that acts as an intermediary to arrange and plan the transportation of goods. Freight brokers are contracted by the shippers to work with third-party businesses. Now, with a freight forwarder, they perform some similar services to the freight brokers. However, freight forwarders also take an active role in the preparation of shipment of cargo in the ways that freight brokers do not. And a lot of that is due to stipulations by the government. So if a freight broker wants to do some of these things, they can, but they would need to get additional licensing. All right. So we're going to move on. And I'm moving really fast here because I want to get into the meat and potatoes of everything. Also want to stop and pause and say thanks everybody for subscribing. And if you like this video, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you're liking, so that way I can make more videos to help you be successful in your trucking and freight transportation business. Okay, so what does a freight broker really do? Now, full disclosure, I do have a freight broker license, so I know this information. However, I just want to use Google to help define this. So a freight broker is a middleman between the shippers and carriers. Now, instead of taking possession of the freight, the broker facilitates communication between the shipper and the carrier. They're the ones that making sure that the handoff goes smoothly between carriers and shippers, and that the freight arrives safely on time. All right. Now, here's a diagram to kind of give you an idea of what a freight forwarder does. Now, over here in the top left corner, you've got the shipper. And the shipper contacts a freight broker to arrange a load to transport. Here we have have that individual here in this picture. Now, the freight broker reaches out to a carrier, usually a carrier they may find on a load board, or it may be somebody they already have a relationship with. So that carrier is given instructions to go and pick up that freight, where to pick it up, and where to drop it off. Now, the communication between the carrier and the broker is made throughout the shipment. There should be another line here going back to the shipper, because this freight broker should also be communicating to this shipper in regards to what is going on with the freight. Now, we have here what is called the truck dispatcher. Now, a truck dispatcher's job is essentially to manage freight on behalf of a carrier. That includes using load boards and personal connections to locate freight that needs to be shipped, speaking to brokers, conducting negotiations, and eventually dispatching drivers and setting up their routes. Now, the dispatcher does not have a broker's license nor a freight forwarder's license. They're a middleman of a middleman of a middleman. So you're three middlemen deep. So I want you to get this visual that the dispatcher is down the line as compared to the freight forwarder being the closest to the shipper, the freight broker being the next closest, and then you have the dispatcher. Okay? So when we think about dispatchers, here is just a little fact sheet I found, 12 interesting facts about dispatchers. They have here that truck dispatchers usually dispatch seven class 8 trucks on average. Over the year, those 7 class 8 trucks will drive 700,000 miles. On average, salary is $42,000, which is 5% below U.S. national average. The top 1% of dispatchers make $100,000 a year. Dispatcher working 100% commission can make up to 3% of truck gross income, up to 3% of truck gross income. Now, the average dispatcher makes 250 calls a week and talks to about 145 different persons. The average U.S. trucking dispatcher has 8 years experience. Some of them have a lot more. Their education is required, basically a GED or a high school diploma is sufficient. But there are some that have a bachelor's degree. And then the highest dispatcher salary in New York and Denver is 9% above the national average. So those two areas claim that dispatchers in those areas make the most money. And then the lowest dispatcher salaries are in Los Angeles, and they're 9% below the average, which I find interesting because Los Angeles is a very big port. Now, as we move forward, I wanted to touch in on how many miles does a driver drive on an average. So according to Google and studies, it shows that most drivers drive about anywhere from 80,000 to 110,000 miles annually, although there are certainly truckers on loads who break 125,000 miles. Now, I do believe those are possible when you look at if they've got a steady lane and they know that lane is moving like it is, then they'll get more mileage. If they're doing spotty work, in other words, they might drop a load, got to wait for a dispatcher to find a load, or got to wait for a broker to approve a load, and all those things, then they're not going to drive as many miles. They're going to be sitting more because they're going to be waiting for that next load. So having a lane as a part of your business model is key. And that's where some of the videos I've talked about before, where you're building your route, building your area, this is where this comes into play. If you know where you want to be, if you know how much money you want to make, if you know how many miles you can drive per day, if you know how many hours you're going to work per week, then you can get more mileage from your truck because you're more consistent. And that's the key about all this, the more consistency and getting from point A to point B. So I wanted to dig a little deeper, and I wanted to ask the question, what is the average pay? And I found this chart from TCI Business Capital. What it's telling me is for van freight rates, and this was April 16, 2023, they put this up. And at the time, this was just a broad, overview of what rates were looking like. Compared West Coast, South Central, Midwest, Southeast, and the Northeast zone. So we see here that Midwest was the highest of the rates, second followed by Central, South Central, then Southeast, Northeast, and then the West being the lowest. So that may explain why a dispatcher out west is going to make less money than a dispatcher out in the Northeast. But however, a dispatcher here in the South should be making pretty good, as well as Midwest. So I find that interesting. Now, let's crunch some numbers. If you were evaluating whether or not you wanted to do a dispatcher relationship and what that was going to look like financially, we're going to go over that right now. Before we do, I want to give a shout out to all my new subscribers and say thank you for subscribing. I really appreciate you supporting this channel. And I want to ask you to share this video with people you think might like this video. And don't forget to turn on that notification bell so you can be notified with new videos when they come out. All right, so drum roll, please. Let's get into some numbers. So I found a dispatching company, and I found this link through FreightWaves as I was digging around, because dispatching companies are not necessarily public. They are your smaller mom and pop, 1 man, 2 man, 3 man shows, usually family owned type of businesses. So I was very fortunate to find this particular, and I'm not affiliated with Genius Dispatch. I'm just using this for educational purposes only. So the company promotes that they do dry vans, reefers, and flatbeds only. They also advertise they have a couple of ratings here. Now, I did do some due diligence, and I looked these 4 companies they have down here. I looked them up because I was curious, are they real people? And I was able to find all 3 of these, except for National Brokers Inc. I could not find them on the Federal Motor Carrier Safety website. Just a note. So, in going through the website, they look pretty good. I seemed to see, that they were very transparent about the services and what they could offer. So, clicking on this link of their plans and pricing, it gives some pricing about what they will charge based on how many trucks you have. So if you've got 1 truck, they're charging a flat 5% rate per load, 4.5% for 2 to 3 trucks, 4% for 3 plus trucks, and they have a $60 a month per truck per month back office services. So this is going to go into your evaluation plan. Now, you've already set up everything and you know how much money you need to make. Now you want some help finding loads. You want some help getting things in order, organizing, and you really don't want to spend a whole lot of money, but you want to evaluate a company like this. Now, I went over, let me go to here, slide this over here. All right, so jumping ahead of myself. Now, I showed you the other day about using this free load board. It's directfreight.com. I am not affiliated with them, but I like to use this as a teaching tool. So we're going to take into consideration a load down here. We're going to use this as a live example in connection with this particular plan right here to evaluate, is this something you should be doing? Is this something that's going to benefit you if you were going to go the truck dispatch route? Okay. Now, when would you probably be thinking about this? If you're a new driver, chances are sometimes freight brokers and forwarders don't want to work with you. So you go to dispatchers because dispatchers are a little bit less restrictive as to who they'll work with. Okay. Now, some people will stay with those dispatches forever. Some people will use them as a stepping stone. It's all going to depend on what your game plan is moving forward, and evaluating how much money you're making versus how much money you're spending versus how much money you're saving. All of those things need to be taken into place also with the services they offer. So we're going to look at here using these plans, and we see here we've got a load for $1,868.88. They're charging $1.77 per mile. So what I had my question on is this 5% per truckload. Are they charging me per mile 5%? Or are they charging me for the gross 5%? That's something to be cleared up. I did not see that, and that's a question you'd probably want to ask them. So I did want to crunch some numbers, okay? So here's what I crunched. So I've already set this up, but let's just zero this out real quick. All right, and we're gonna zero this out because I want to walk through this with you, and I'll leave that total miles. Okay, so what we have here, if we're looking at this, we know that the pay rate on this is $1868.88. Okay. We've got another one here at $2,300, also going to Massachusetts, picking up in Pendergrass, Georgia. Let's do the $2,300. It's an even number. I like even numbers. Okay, so we're going to type in here the payload is $2,300. All right. Now they're charging me 5%. Their pay on that is going to be $115. All right. Now, what is the per mileage rate that they're just $2,300? They're saying per mile, I'm making $2.27. All right. So I punch in my $2 and my 27 cents. At 5% commission, they're getting 11 cents per mile. Now, the destination, looking at the destination, here is Pendergrass, Taunton, Massachusetts. Let's do a Google search to see how many miles that is. So Pendergrass, let's just do a quick Google map search to see how many miles that is. Okay, we're going from Pendergrass, Georgia. Okay, directions. And we are, flip this, and we're going to go to Taunton, Massachusetts. Taunton, Massachusetts. T-A-U-N, Taunton, Massachusetts. There we go. Now, how many miles is that? Let's see. What are we getting? 1,032 miles. Okay, so we're going to type in 1,032 miles. All right, 1,032 miles. So if they were to charge us by mile or per mile 5%, they're making $117 and $117.13. Okay, so right down here we got to do a little math. And when the math that we're doing is the difference. So what's the difference between this 115 and this 117? Well, they're making $2.13. Now, on average, I don't know why that's doing. Oh, yes, I do. Okay. Really? That can't be right. So anyway, on average, they say that the average yearly mileage, what do we go back here? What do we say? We said 110,000 miles up to 125,000 miles. Okay. So the average yearly mileage is 125,000 miles. So 125, that's your goal. You want to make it, you want to reach 125,000 miles per, okay? Now, what this number right here represents is if you were driving this on average, how much money would you be losing? Because The dispatcher's making $117.13, $2.13 more if they charge you per mile. If they charge you gross based on that payload, it's they're losing $213. If your goal is to drive 125,000 miles, you could be losing $266,500 per year by your dispatcher charging 5% for the per mile rate versus 5% for the load pay rate. That is a lot of money. So what I'm showing you here is, where is your money going? Truthfully, where's your money going? Now we can reverse this if you want, and we can do this, and we can say, so that we can turn this right side up. We can say pay difference is equals the sum. All right, and we're going to say this minus this, $2.13. We've got your average here, still 125,000 miles. So what is your potential moneymaker? This equals the sum. Okay, I don't know why I did that. The sum of 213 times 125. So this is huge. This is huge right here. Okay? This is how much money coming out of your pocket is going into the broker's pocket, or the dispatcher's pocket. Now, there's nothing wrong with using a dispatcher, but do you see how much money you're losing, you're giving away to that dispatcher when they charge you 5%? And we can change this. The more trucks you have, the more money they make. So let's change these numbers. Let's do that. So what did they say? Let's say you grow your business and you've got 4 trucks. Okay, so you got 4 trucks and they're charging you 4% per flat rate. And you're like, 4%? That's not a lot of money. That's pretty good. So we're going to type in 4% here, $92. We're typing 4% here. Okay, you're still giving away $213,400 a year. If you're averaging 125,000 miles a year, those are huge. So I just wanted you to get the numbers, get the feel. Where's your money going? Now, a lot of truck drivers out there are talking about brokers are stealing their money. I don't hear many of them talking about dispatchers. I don't hear many of them talking about freight forwarders. And by this exercise right here, you can see how 4%, 3%, 5% can be going out the door for you. And if you have, and I'm going to go back to this one. If you have, this is for 4 trucks or 3+ trucks. So let's just say you have 3 trucks. Each truck is getting a 4%, and that is averaging $213 per truck. $213,000 per truck. I got to get that through you. So I hope this information was helpful to you. I hope you're getting a lot out of this, and I hope you can see how you can evaluate your business model to determine, are you in the right place or the wrong place of making money? Because when you use a middleman, you got to pay for it, but you got to figure out how you can do it on your own. So in my next 2 videos, I'm going to be talking about freight forwarders versus freight brokers. Which one is better for you as you make money for your business? All right. I hope this was good for you guys. I will see you on the next video. And as always, thanks for tuning in. Have an awesome day.